Thank you, everyone. As Jamie was doing the introduction, I just found out one of our staff members has COVID. So this is hitting close to home, and it's a challenging time for us. What I'm going to share with you today is really in my context of the work I do. And I work for Compassion International. If any of you are familiar with Compassion, I oversee global human resources for them. We have about 140,000 staff volunteers in 26 countries. So you can imagine what we're going through right now is very personal. And we've got about 2.2 million children that we minister to. And so the challenges, if you can imagine in the developing world, this is a very uncertain and frightening time for us. And so the need for us to be able to lead into what I would call turbulence would be an understatement. But I think it's an opportunity for all of us, regardless of the context that we're leading in. And I think about my own context behind me. I didn't do a backdrop because I have my family back there. I've got stepson and daughter-in-law and two granddaughters. I've got a stepdaughter and then my wife. And I just think about my role as a husband and as a father and as a grandfather, as a friend and as a neighbor and all those things. All of us are impacted by this. As I mentioned, just found out, literally an hour ago that one of my staff members has it. And that brings on a lot of uncertainty for a lot of people at our office. But fortunately, she's in good hands and didn't have a lot of exposure because of being away for personal reasons for quite a while. So the risk factor to our staff is a little less. We've got about 900 people that are based in our headquarters down in Colorado Springs. So we emptied out our office except for essential people about 2 weeks ago before the state order came through. But when you think about entering into something like this, there is no playbook right now. We are writing the playbook, all of us, as we're going along, regardless of the context. So what I'm going to share with you today is just from where I sit, from what I am responsible for leading, for being a leader of a team that oversees all the activity or all the people globally, being part of a team. I'm part of the executive team there at Compassion. And just the context I'm going to share with you is just that. It's where I'm coming from. And what I'd like to do is as I go through each slide, I'll pause and allow Jamie to gather any chat or comments or questions that you might have. But I do really want to say, I'm sorry for those of you that are being impacted by this directly, whether it's job impact, family impact, friends, whatever it may be. It's a challenging time, but it's also an opportunity for us to see things in a different way, in a different perspective, and lead in a different way. So, love Winston Churchill. And I found this quote the other day about kites rise highest against the wind, not with it. And if you know anything about Churchill, there's a movie called Darkest Hour, which is one of my favorite history movies. And he had to step into leadership at a very, terrible time for the United Kingdom, on the verge of collapse from, the Nazi, the war that was beginning. But, you think about us, where we are right now, it truly is, at times feels like we're going against the wind. But it's also an opportunity for things to take place in our own personal lives and in our leadership roles to truly have an impact in our families, in our work environment, in our communities, or to our neighbors. I don't know about you, but I've seen more families out walking lately than I have ever. I've done more talking to my neighbors than I have ever, at a distance, keeping the six foot barrier in place. But it's really just some unique things that I'm seeing right now. And I'm sure you all have stories you could share as well. So what I wanted to talk about was, let's start with what I would call the leadership principles of two things, of a pilot and a flight attendant. The reason I like sharing this is because the irony in this is that I have to travel a lot for work overseas quite often, and I do not like flying. I mean, I'm a white knuckle flyer. So from takeoff to landing, I am sitting there, improving my prayer life, let's just say. But what I found, what's interesting is a good pilot, she or he will keep you informed of what's going on. They're looking ahead. They're seeing weather, bad weather, or turbulence that's coming. I really like it when they communicate well because it takes away maybe the anxiety or the fear that I have. The same is also true for a flight attendant. When things get a little bumpy, sometimes I pay close attention. A good flight attendant will just be steady, will be calm, not running up and down the aisle like something's wrong. And you could be in bad weather and they strap themselves in, they go about doing their job. So a good pilot communicates and is looking forward and letting you know what's coming and where we're headed. Good flight attendant keeps control of the cabin. And you look to them for stability and for calming yourself down in the midst of some crisis or potential crisis. In my case, it's perceived crisis because of bad weather. But I've always thought about that in particularly in times that we're under stress. There's a saying that stress is like a tube of toothpaste. What's inside comes out when you put pressure on it. And it's an opportunity for us in our leadership roles just to be a steady hand, even when we're not sure what lies ahead, but communicating well and just keeping a steady hand on direction we're going, as well as just keeping a calm presence in the middle of it. So let's talk about today's environment we're working in. Obviously, today's a good example. We're doing what I would call virtual reality. I enjoy being with people. And so being isolated like this and working and staring at a screen and not seeing any of you right now is a hard way to communicate for me personally. But that's the reality we're confronted with today. I have to work from home. I think a lot of you may be in the same situation. So there are some challenges that come along with that. I like this. I saw this the other day. It's about Isaac Newton. He was actually had to work from home for almost a year. And it was during that time that he developed his theories on calculus, optics, and gravity. I think they're in reverse order because I think having taken calculus twice in my life, both in undergrad and grad school, I think he fell out of bed, discovered gravity, hit his head, had eyesight problems, and then he developed calculus. But I found this very interesting because here he was locked at home and he still the creative genius that came out and the discoveries that took place. So we never know what these situations are going to do for us or present to us. There are new stresses in this. And the stresses I think that I'm seeing, particularly with the people that I work with, there's stresses as parents. You've got kids at home that you were at an office setting and all of a sudden you've got kids, you've got dual income families. And you just have to, work with that a little bit. Excuse me if this is showing up. Give me a second here. There's a woman that I work with. She and her husband both work for us. And it was very challenging. It's very challenging for them because they have a 2-year-old that they had in daycare and now they have to split their day. And so what does that look like for them and the stress that they're under? Single parents. My stepson works at home. He's working at home now. I have my 2 granddaughters. My daughter-in-law works for a vet, and it's actually deemed essential work, so she goes to work each day. My stepson's at home trying to do his job at the same time trying to help 2 girls who are doing online. They're 6 and 8. They're doing online school. I think about what it is for a single parent to have to deal with those things as well. Singles, we have someone that works for us that just moved to the area about 2 months ago, doesn't know anybody really well, her work environment, and now she's at home all day working. And there are other situations. It's just new stresses that we haven't had in the work environment before. But if you think about solutions, one of the things that I talk about a lot with my team is we just have to extend more grace to one another. have to be a little more patient, have to be a little more forgiving, and understand and enter into that sacred space with somebody when they're willing to share with you what's going on. And from a leadership perspective, what does it mean to come alongside them? And I do mean that in sacred space, because there are opportunities here to really serve other people, serve your teams and those you come in contact with, and truly be able to extend the grace that they need at a time they need. It's actually an opportunity to deepen relationship, ironically, in a virtual way, but you may have people in situations that they haven't been in before, and they're open and willing to share that with you. And being able to come alongside them is really a powerful opportunity. The other thing is just flexibility in workloads and when people are going to work. I don't know if you've ever heard of ROWE. It's results-oriented work environment. And what you do with that is you just, hey, let's agree on what our expectations are. But when you do that and how you go about doing it is up to you, because you need flexibility. And so there's just opportunities that we have in the challenges we're facing right now with these new stresses, but also an opportunity to really lead well in that space by extending grace and honoring the flexibility that people need to do their jobs well. I also think that on the backside of this, we're going to learn how to do work differently. It's going to open doors and opportunities for people that may not have been in the workforce today that could be in the workforce, because we're opening our paradigms a little bit, or we're shifting our paradigms. So Jamie, I'm going to pause there for a second and see if there's anything anybody has they want to share, or any questions that may have surfaced.
Yes, sir. We do have some questions that have popped in, so thank you very much. We have several questions. The first one here was, when you're only seeing negative things ahead, what suggestions do you have to continue? Do you stay honest or do you remain optimistic?
That's it's actually something I'm going to talk about at the very end, but it's really, and I'll talk about it now, but I'll revisit it again. The interesting thing about attitude, and I'll talk about attitude in that sense, is that it's when things are out of control and things are becoming negative, our attitude makes a huge difference. Because I think in that, the one thing we do have that we can control is our reaction to things. The second part of the question was, do we just be honest? Yeah, I think we have to be transparent with good boundaries. We can't be the ones saying the sky's falling in and run around like, Chicken Little. But at the same time, we do need to be honest with the people that we're working with. And there are varying degrees of level of honesty, not degrees of honesty, but just transparency, that you want to protect people at the same time. But for me, the direct reports I have, more of the extended leadership team, is where we will have the more honest conversations and deal with the negative stuff. And then it becomes an issue of how do we communicate that to our teams in a fair way, but in a balanced way, so we don't create unnecessary burden or unnecessary panic on their part.
That's great. This question just came in. I thought it was really relevant. When you were with Blockbuster, I think you got out at a good time for Blockbuster, but we have heard the story of how they didn't really adapt to the times, even with the opportunity to purchase Netflix. And I think some have even said, I've heard this quoted, where they thought they were in the VHS business, but they were really in the home entertainment business, right? So how do you see that relating to what we're going through right now and adapting to the times that we are in?
Sure. Just like you mentioned, Jamie, we helped start the company in 1986. There was a small group of us. And we sold our interests back to the parent company in 1989. So, a long time ago. We saw what was taking place potentially in the transformation that was going to occur. We were bought by a company called Viacom. And Viacom saw that the video industry was just booming it was really through Blockbuster and a couple other larger stores that were similar to ours. And they just saw it as, quite honestly, as a cash cow. They kept pouring into it, building more stores. I think at one time they got up to 7,000 stores globally. But you could see the writing on the wall that technology was going to change that way of delivering entertainment. And they made some choices back then not to invest in the technology. And I love that phrase. I hadn't heard it, but we thought we were in the VHS rental business and not in the entertainment business. So great question. No post-traumatic stress disorder from that experience on my part. So
Yeah.
like I said, I got out in 1989, so it was good timing.
So what we're seeing though right now is we're seeing people changing their entire way of doing business. They're reinventing themselves. I know here at Journey, we have totally reinvented ourselves. Restaurants are going curbside deliveries. What other advice might you have for folks during these times if they're holding on to the way of business? And I think the follow-up to that is, I don't think it'll ever go. It may not ever be exactly the way it was. Things are gonna stick that we're doing now, even when we get back to somewhat of a normal routine where we're not staying at home or locked in. What feedback or what thoughts do you have on that?
Yeah, interesting. I read an article the other day by a research group. I can't remember the name of them, out of New York, and they primarily focus on nonprofits. And they basically said it, with the exception of 10% of the industry that maybe has government contracts or something like that, the 90% of the industry in the nonprofit industry is going to have to reinvent itself. They're going to have to behave like a startup, no matter what size they are. We're a large organization. Fortunately, we've got some innovation muscle in place, but not to the degree that we're so wedded to a model right now for supporting children, that model is going to have to change, even because of the way we work with the kids now. It's going to have to become a little more innovative. Personally, I'm not the most innovative person. And so I think we need to, as leaders and individuals, we need to recognize what our blind side is and protect it. And what I mean by that is I want to be able to partner with somebody that is more innovative than me. And I better hope I'm not trying to be the smartest person in the room when I do that, because I need people like that to partner with me and to come up with some innovative, different ways of doing things. I think the riskier positions you're in is the more stable that the organization is going into this. There wasn't that impetus or the drive to do something in a different, more innovative way. So, and I really feel for people in the small businesses and in the restaurant business and in the service business, because I was in that business, for part of my career. And I just, my heart goes out to them, because I don't, I'm not in a place where I can help them change. All I can do is, as a consumer, do what I can do to help them. But again, I think it's really important to partner well and understand what you're good at and what you're not good at in a time like this, and be able to partner with people that really can think outside the box and get creative.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we have a room full of leaders, nearly 100 leaders on this chat right now, which is fantastic, taking their time to tune in. And what we're seeing, I know here, is that for us, there's been a question around, even, I'll just use this, ministry at church. I heard Pastor Scotty say, and a lot of people around the world are saying, nobody's really freaking out about online church right now. Like it's not it can be done. It's obviously where everybody's going through Zoom calls, online messaging, but what we're finding out is that our systems and the way we do things, I've heard leaders say, marry the mission and date the model. I think Andy Stanley used that quote. The model in which we operate from, it doesn't matter. People matter. What are ways in which our leaders can be, leaders that we have on this call right now? They're leading people. They're aligning with their leadership teams, and great leaders lead through hard times. What is ways in which you're seeing people connecting to their customers, to their people, to make sure they know how they feel about them, to keep engaged with them?
Yeah, I think it takes over communication in times like this, and I don't. It's actually one of the things I was going to cover, but I don't think you can over communicate the right things right now. And the frequency of contact and connecting with customers or your employees or whoever it might be, it's even more challenging in a virtual context. And people during a time of uncertainty and fear need more of that, not less of it. What I worry about is the person that isolates themselves. You know, I'm in a team that I'm leading or an extended team. I'm spending an awful lot of my time on Zoom calls, not formal meetings or phone calls, just checking in with people. And so that's both the people I'm serving, but also then, you know, if I were in the retail business again, or if I were in something where I had client services, I would be going out of my way, not just to garner business, but to maintain those relationships and to really foster those relationships.
Great. I don't think we have any other questions at this time for you, Tom. So
Great.
Continue, please.
We talked a little bit about this just now, but one of the things I do a lot of management by walking around at work, and I travel a lot, so I spend a lot of time with people. It's very difficult these days to get what I would call FaceTime. And FaceTime it's taken, not the technology FaceTime on your phone, but literally time, you know, face to face with people. Like I said earlier, I can see Jamie and he can see me, but I can't see anybody else. And that's just, you know, a different world that we're working in. But when we're working from home, sometimes people don't have the technology available to them. I've got people working with me now that don't have laptops. And so, you know, I'll talk a little bit about some solutions or some ideas in a second. But then we also have people that are in a situation where there is no option for them to work from home. And I'm talking about my context again. It's people that are employees of ours, that their jobs require them to be at our headquarters, and they can't do their job. So when I look at possible solutions, one of the things with lack of FaceTime, I was on a call the other day, a Zoom call, and it got a little contentious. And it was very difficult to try to resolve conflict in a virtual setting. And so what we're starting to do is just saying, hey, let's have an offline conversation on that. And it can be a little more private. And this is not new in terms of if I were actually in a meeting and it got a little heated, you might say take something offline, but now you've got to be a lot more intentional about it. And so being able to have those offline conversations to help solve problems that you might have. Technology where they don't have maybe a laptop, and I found this, it was kind of funny. We have a service desk within HR, and it's typically younger people that are kind of entry level into HR. And I talked to one of them the other day, said, hey, I'll call you on my landline. And they didn't know what a landline was. So kind of aged myself a little bit on that. But I think there's a bit of old school approach to doing things. And then what our solution is for this, and it's just us, we're in a very unique place, I think. But for the people that can't work from home right now, we are continuing to, keep them on our payroll. And it's the right thing to do. And we'll continue that for, as long as the foreseeable future and, economic recovery ahead. Praying for that as well. But that's one of the ways we're solving it. We're also trying to redeploy people at the same time, and are working hard to find creative ways for people to do work that they haven't done before. And it's a great opportunity for us to do cross-training as well. So Jamie, if you're monitoring the chat, if there's anything, other questions or observations before I move on. All right.
Can you hear me, Tom?
Yep, I can hear you now.
Okay, great. We did have a question just come in that said, can you share with us how Compassion and the local CDCs are continuing to support children enrolled in Compassion programs?
Yeah.
And then it goes on to say, is there an opportunity to continue growing Compassion's global footprint because of some of the connection efforts you're using as part of the COVID response?
Yeah. Let me give, for people that don't know the Compassion model and how we work, we actually partner with local churches. We don't actually implement any program. We partner with the church in the 25 countries we work in. We have well over 8,000 church partners now. And they implement the program that we help design with them. So they minister to, on average, about 250 beneficiaries or kids in that program. The challenge we've got right now is most of those, the CD, we call them a child development, CDCs are based in the church. And so the children come in from their homes in different parts of the community and are ministered through the church that way. So obviously we've got challenges right now because I think every country we're in now is banning public gathering. But the churches are getting very creative, and they're working in the communities to do food delivery, medical delivery, where they can. It's not across the board. We're continuing to work with them. The resources that go to the church on behalf of the children is continuing to go into there. We're just getting a little more creative on how we're going to help them solve the problem. But the power of the way the approach is for working with the local churches, they know their communities incredibly well. We don't. And that's by design. We partner with them. And so as those needs arise, and they will increasingly arise, we're there to support them. And where we can bring in partner organizations to help them in areas that we don't specialize in, we are mobilizing those teams as well to be able to do that. And then, just as if you are sponsoring a child now or thinking about it, there's ways you can help that child beyond just sponsorship. And all you have to do is go to the website and check in your account if you have one online. It'll give you opportunities on how to do that. But this is a crisis. It's a global crisis. And my biggest concern in all of this is that the most vulnerable, those kids and the families, are the ones that are in the, we're just praying that there's just stem the tide of this, because it could be really devastating from a developing country perspective. But again, the power of the connection with that local church and ministering to those kids is, it truly is a powerful partnership, and them knowing their communities well and how to minister is really the key for us.
Awesome. There was one other question that came in, and it relates back to a previous question that you were talking about answering later. And so you can kind of take this question, or you can maybe hold on to it for later, your decision. But it just was very simple. How are you personally balancing realism, caution, and hope?
That's a great. It feels like that's a day by day, sometimes hour by hour journey. And I feel very blessed to, have a family that's, very supportive and understanding of what we're trying to do as a family, but what I'm trying to do in my role. I talked to someone the other day, and they were pretty negative on something. They said, "Don't you feel that way?" And I said, if I allow myself to feel overly negative on something, it's going to bleed out. And it's going to bleed out in my family. It's going to bleed out in the work I do. And I'm not trying to be in denial. At least I hope I'm not. But by the same token, I'm generally an optimist. If you know anything about Strength Finders, one of my top 5 strengths is positivity. And so in the midst of this, it's trying to maintain that and realize, like I was talking earlier about the pilot or the flight attendant, I've got to be able to not be in denial, but I've got to be able to deal with reality, but then also hopefully instill just that hope in people. And, the core of my hope rests solely on my faith. And it's not faith in myself, it's faith in God. So it's an important part, but it's a great question, because like I said, it's a daily journey for me. And I'm learning a lot in the course of it, actually.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for answering that, Tom.
Yeah. All right. Want me to keep going here, Jamie?
Yeah, that would be great. There are a couple other questions coming in, which is great, but why don't you continue and we'll jump back to these in a little bit.
Okay. So the other thing, and I'll move through this a little bit quicker, is the challenge of doing development. What I mean by development is in the role I'm in, I've got, individuals that report to me that I feel a responsibility to help them in their development, professionally and sometimes personally, but then also team development. And I used this term before when I talk about increased virtual managing by walking around. I'm used to being, probably goes back to my retail background. I'm used to being out and talking to people and just checking in on them. I just have to be far more intentional on that in what I'm doing today in this environment. Like I said earlier, I'll do impromptu meetings with people. I'll call people. I'll just check in, make sure they're not feeling isolated and that they've got a clear understanding of what we're trying to do and what we're doing about that. And then just making sure I've got more frequent contact with people. That's a challenge. But the good thing is you get that rhythm going. You also find it coming back because I have more people now reaching out to me to check in and see how I'm doing, which I deeply appreciate as well. So, yeah, let me back up there, Jamie, and see if there's any other questions before we move on. All right. I don't know if you can see this. I thought this was pretty funny. I have a dog at home, which she's behaving. She hasn't barked yet, but give her time. But if someone from work sent me this, I just thought it was kind of funny. I'll read it to you if you can't see it. It says, the human has been working from home the last couple of days. And every so often, they let me participate in video calls. All the other humans cheer when they see me. I am the only thing holding their company together. So I love seeing that because I do have a dog and she likes people and she likes being around and she's having a great time right now because everybody's around taking care of her. So the other thing I wanted to talk about is there are a couple things, but we may run out of time here, which is fine. Talk about virtual realities. Staff care for us is critical. We're really blessed to have full-time pastoral care on our staff. But right now, when you deal with both physical and mental health, I'm actually far more worried right now, believe it or not, in the midst of the physical challenges people are having with the mental health side of things. You've got people under stress that they've never been under before. You've got people in working conditions that they've never been working in before. And I think you're going to see more and more of this become an issue. And so how do we get ahead of that? And what we do as an organization, we have what's called EAP, Employee Assistance Program. And that became virtual. So people can get the counseling or support they need from their home. They don't have to go somewhere. And we're doing similar things on the physical side with what's called teledoc. I don't know if anybody's heard of that, but you can actually call in and do an appointment virtual with a doctor. But there are different things we're doing just to really help. And then, as I mentioned, we have pastoral care. We have an incident response team that has been mobilized within our organization that is meeting daily to monitor situations and address any of the personnel problems that may come up outside of the normal HR norm things that I have to deal with. So, all right, Jamie, I'm going to move on. Yeah, we talked about this earlier, but broad scale, what I would call broad scale communication is organization communication. And we're intentionally now doing this more frequently than we were in the past. What's interesting about the frequency of the communication is I'm learning that if you're talking about the right things, frequency becomes less of an issue, meaning people appreciate the fact that you're communicating with them more frequently. I think a good thing that's going to come out of this situation is that'll be a rhythm that we're going to have in place that we hopefully will not let go of, because I know I need to know what's going on from, Jimmy, who I work for, and what he's thinking about and direction he's wanting to take things. So the frequency is increased, and I think that's a good thing. I think we can't over communicate the right things. I know I'm doing something well in communication when someone finally looks at me and goes, you've told me that like 3 times. Like, great, it's getting across, and just like I said, the pilot, being out there in front, seeing things and keeping people well informed. And then finally, someone asked this earlier, and the authenticity is so important. You can't fake this stuff. You can't fake communication. You can't spin doctor things, because people are smart and they need to be, you need to treat them like you'd want to be treated. And that is being honest and open. But as I mentioned earlier, sometimes there are boundaries that we have to be careful that we're not creating fear because we're afraid, and therefore we make others afraid when we're dealing with not the enough information to be able to address things. So sometimes you've got to say, hey, I don't know, but I'll find out. And if I can't find out, I'll tell you why. Just so you can keep things open with people and they feel like, okay, it's a dialogue. It's not a monologue. So, all right, Jamie, I'll pause there again. See if you got any questions coming through.
Yeah, we do. We have a few questions, and I just want to say first, appreciate your the layout of this conversation, that you're wanting to integrate questions back and forth and engage the audience. So
Sure.
Keep those questions coming, folks. We do have one here. It says, what would you say to someone that wants to start a business now? He says, I'm a natural contrarian and would like to take advantage of the opportunities that are presenting themselves. And maybe even in relation to you saying everyone's kind of functioning as a startup right now. What do you have to say to that?
Yeah. I mean, you're seeing things develop right now that didn't exist 2 months ago. And one thing, when we looked at Blockbuster and even Boston Marco, when we were doing in the startup phase, what we looked at was the strength of the concept, meaning like at Blockbuster, when we started it, there were, I think, over 40,000 video stores. So everybody thought we were crazy with this idea. And when I say this idea, there was actually one store open when we got involved with it. It was down in Dallas, Texas. But what we saw was kind of where the Wayne Gretzky hockey analogy, if you've ever heard of that, he was so good because he knew where the puck was going, not where it is. And that's the idea behind concept. The concept of the business or the idea that you have is going where the stream is headed, not against the stream. I heard this one time, I really liked it. If Michael Phelps and I got in a pool together and swam same direction that the current is going, he's going to beat me 10 times out of 10. But if I'm swimming downstream and he's swimming against a real heavy stream, I like my chances. That's like a concept. A concept is going with it. It's movement. It can't not do what it's doing. And so, being a contrarian, is the person asked the question. That's great. That's where some incredible ideas have come from. The challenge you're going to have in an environment like this is just capitalization. How you find the capital to do something if it requires capital. But there's a lot of innovation going on right now, and finding someone that can partner with you, if whatever it is, financially or areas that you're not strong in, I would strongly encourage that. But yeah, I think it's the concept is really the starting point, and then building a team and getting it financed properly and things like that are critical. But concept is the starting point.
Yeah. Great answer. Appreciate that. Okay, here's another question. What does it look like right now for support, ground support, in the countries that Compassion is supporting, from food, education, water, and health issues? What does the ground support look like in those countries?
It'll depend on the country, because more developed, when I say developed, it's a very relative term. The more developed communities that we work in, primarily in Latin America, they're still very impoverished, but there's a little more infrastructure in place. So the healthcare system might be better. The education system might be better. Where the challenges are is when you get into parts of West Africa, parts of South Asia, and it's really pockets. It may not be a country as a whole, but if you get outside of the urban setting, the infrastructure there is very, very weak. And that's when I say we tend to partner with other organizations that if a community needs water, we'll partner with a water ministry as opposed to us trying to be experts in drilling wells and putting sustainable things in place like that. But we'll partner with them with deploying our resources that we raise to help support what they're doing. But again, it gets back to country by country. And when we start off this conversation, there is no playbook for this right now. We're writing the playbook as we go along, and we're no different than anybody else in terms of the innovation and the solution. But again, partnering with those local churches is a really powerful partnership.
Yes. All right. Here's another one for you.
Okay.
As it applies to development, how much time does the average person spend in these areas? I get the sense that leaders spend more time here, but what about a regular worker?
I assume on personal development, like professional, and I would assume that. That really becomes a function of who they're reporting to and who is kind of coaching them. Because if they expect them, if they don't provide margin for that, time and resources, it doesn't happen unless the person is just doing it on their own time. And there's so much learning opportunity available now outside of work. But a good manager or leader should be partnering with that person to find out, what do you need? What areas do you want to develop in? What areas should you for your role, whether it's as an individual contributor, critical roles there, or if it's in a leadership role. But it really becomes a function in a work context of having leadership that supports that development and realizes that, they're only as strong as the most challenged person is in their skill set or their ability to do their work. And so, it's beneficial both ways to make sure you allocate enough time for that and allow for that to take place. It's a really good question.
Great. One last question right here, and then you can finish up or we can continue. We got about 12 minutes left.
Okay.
Do you recommend that small businesses instill a mental health program for their employees?
I think if you can afford it, absolutely. And I think there are probably creative ways to do that. I mean, as I mentioned, we have EAP and we pay for that. And the way our program works is you get the first 6 sessions with a mental health provider are in our benefits program. And then we make some accommodations depending on what the situation might be. But yeah, if you can afford it, I would strongly encourage it. If not, making sure you've got at least a network of resources that can be available to someone. Because again, it's challenging. Life's challenging to begin with. This time is even far more challenging, and a lot of stressors and uncertainty that's coming in different work environments, as we talked about earlier as well. All right. Anything else, Jamie, before we kind of hit the home stretch?
It's all you.
All right, man. Finally, the question was earlier about, and I referenced attitude. Let me show you a quote. I don't know how many of you ever heard of Viktor Frankl. He wrote a book, I think it's called Man's Search for Meaning. And he was a concentration camp survivor. And he talked about at the end of the day, what he determined was kind of interesting is that he felt he actually had more freedom than the prison guards that had tortured him. And, it's mind-boggling to me that someone could come to that place. And this was the essence of what he talked about. And it's everything can be taken from a person, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. And it's really the power of attitude. And I'm not saying it's easy because it's not easy for me. I just think that we fail to realize we do have choices. And sometimes it's in the face of just devastating things, but we have a choice. And I'm not saying just go in denial and be happy. Grieving is, Jesus wept. In fact, I read about it this morning in John when Lazarus died and Mary and Martha were there, and he wept. So obviously Jesus had emotions, and we're created in God's image, and we were created that way. But we do have this opportunity, and attitude is so powerful. I do an orientation for our interns that we do every summer. And when I talk to them, a lot of times I get questions from younger people, especially that are still in college. Hey, what do I need to do to do X, Y, Z? And I usually go back to, have a mindset, an attitude of ownership, and realize that what you bring to it and bring your best to it is the best you can. That's all you can do. A lot of the circumstances are out of your control, but the ability to have an attitude that goes in and says, you know what, I'm going to be part of the solution. I'm going to be a problem solver, not a problem creator. And I think in the face of what we're going through right now, it's a really important thing as leaders to maintain that, again, in a balanced way. I'm not trying to say be in denial, but at the same time, it's a opportunity for us to lead and really be light in some really dark spaces at times. So, wanted to leave you with something. I found this the other day. I'll read it to you in case you can't read it, but it's from Laura Kelly Finucci. It's talking about the pandemic that we're in right now. And it reads, when this is over, may we never again take for granted a handshake with a stranger, full shelves at the store, conversations with neighbors, a crowded theater, Friday night out, the taste of communion, a routine checkup, the school rush each morning, coffee with a friend, the stadium roaring, each deep breath, a boring Tuesday, life itself. When this ends, may we find that we have become more like the people we wanted to be, we were called to be, we hope to be. May we stay that way, better for each other because of the worst. Before I get to that, I just, again, there's an attitude in this of saying, hey, we're going to get through this. And when we get through it, are we going to be better for it or not? And, my prayer and hope and for myself is that, I learned things in the course of this, and that I'm a better husband and a better father and a better grandfather and a better friend and a better leader as a result of going through, the crucible like we're going through right now. But seeing, like I mentioned earlier, I'm seeing things around me with people and friends and conversations that, I think in my closed off, head down, get my work done world, I'm waking up to those things myself. So wanted to share that with you. Jamie, I'll send this to you later if people are interested. These are just some resources that I'm using within my own work that helps. Gartner is a organization I do a lot of work with that actually has free resources available. The other two are subscription based, but I just wanted to, just end there and see if there are any other questions or anything else you'd like to talk about before we wrap our time up.
Tom, that was great. I'm not seeing any new questions pop up, but just wanted to say thank you again. We actually do have somebody on our chat that is with the Harvard Business School. So I know you just shared a resource there, and she shared some resources earlier, which is fantastic. And that's what's great about this network of people, that we're coming together to learn about being great leaders and through adversity and through turbulence, as you said. How do we do that? And I think one of the best ways we can do that is to be there for one another. I love that quote that you just shared from Laura Kelly Finucci there. That was it's just a great reminder of where we're at in these days.